Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto created a spy network with his shadow clones. WIP and unconscious Iruka forces Naruto to return to the academy for another year. It also marks the beginnings of a prank whose far-reaching consequences will shake Konoha to its foundations. Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel, and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard. Chapter 9, Back to School. Tatsujin Hiroshi? Present. Uzumaki Naruto? Here. Karakura? Said student raised her hand. Muramaru? Hi. Perfect. Now, both as your primary instructor and as your ninjutsu teacher, I welcome you all to this year at the Konoha Ninja Academy. For all of you new students, my name is Umino Iruka and teaching ninjutsu is my specialty. To those of you returning for another year here, my job is to iron out whatever deficiencies you have and make you all better ninjas. Said teacher looked around as most of the class nodded. A quick look around revealed easily the state of the class. Bigger than the previous one, which was somewhat unexpected. It was the first class whose starting student would have been born for sure after the Kyuubi. The lack of members from preeminent shinobi families was also telling. Since none of the clan-born students from the previous year had failed to pass, there was only a branch Hyuga and a male member of the Kurama family currently in the room. As for returners, there were 10, Naruto not included. That was higher than average and a good thing in the Chunin's mind, as Konoha needed the manpower. Now, I'd like for everyone returning for a new year to raise their hands. There's no shame in that, as there's always more students graduating than jonin available for mentoring. One by one the returners raised their hands. Naruto also did, and Iruka was proud of the fact that none of his other selves even twitched. It probably had helped that this wasn't the first time he'd gone through this ritual. To those who are in their first attempt, these are the students who have a good clue on how to proceed. I'll try to make myself available as much as possible, but unfortunately there's only one of me. If I'm too busy or I'm out of reach, ask around. I'm pretty sure you can find someone who can help you in this class. Only a few nodded this time. Muramaru, the male Naruto clone, was one of them, but not the female one. Now, another show of hands. Outside those who are returning, raise your hand if any of you have already had some kind of official ninja instruction. A good half of the class responded, with Ariko as one of them. Which meant those who haven't. Only 6 people had their hands up, Muramaru included. He nodded. There's no shame in any of this either. I personally was barely trained before coming to the academy, and I'm the one teaching you now. The most important thing each of you needs is effort. As long as you train hard and study hard, passing the required exams will be a certainty. As long as you don't have some kind of birth defect like Rock Lee, he mentally added. Now, as I said before, I'll be teaching you ninjutsu, and general ninja knowledge along with that. We'll be seeing each other every morning, along with. Two small thumps in her hair said it all. Incoming. What a cute bunny. Where did you find it? The Naruto clone known as Ariko turned to the side to find 5 girls right beside her. One was looking at her face, but all the rest were cooing over Ichibo who was in his customary place sitting upon her head. So that's what he meant. She mused. I didn't. My father bought it for me as an acceptance present. Lucky you. The lead girl, and the only one who had looked at Ariko's face, cried out. I only wished my father was as generous as yours. She brought out her hand out of her pocket to shake. Suzuki Fumichi. Mori Nishi. Hayabashi Asano. Okita Mihoshi. And Kimura Ringo. Joden Ariko. And the little guy upstairs is Ichibo. It had been cleared with him. Ariko could use his real name. From what he said, it had been more than 15 years since he'd been summoned anyway. Can he do anything? Asano said. I don't know. The Bunshin answered. She wasn't supposed to be much of a ninja yet. My father said he was a ninja bunny though. A ninja bunny? Where did he get it? Somewhere in grass, I think. One left front leg thump. Yes. He agrees. How? Asked Mihoshi. He seems to understand everything quite normally. She pointed toward the rabbit. Ichibo, say yes again. Said rabbit once again hit the clone's head with his left front paw. How intelligent, responded Fumichi. The rest were also looking at the animal in obvious awe. The other paws no. That's pretty much all he does for now. That was quite false. The real Naruto had been working with Ichibo near full-time since the last council meeting on silent communication. It wasn't up to the point of actual language, but by combining thumps from all four legs with specific noises, the rabbit could pass simple messages to the clone, or ninja, working as his perch. Naruto's side of the bargain was all in the fingers, snapping some either in the air or against the other hand. So, what does your father do? Said Ringo. Merchant. She answered instantly. They had been part of her persona's setup. What kind? Asked Nishi. That hadn't. Ariko answered the first thing that came to mind. Clothing. She had been looking at the pattern on the lead girl's clothes at that time. Like your kunoichi outfit? No, civilian clothing. She'd bought her outfit in Konoha, so couldn't say that it was from her father. He's rarely in Konoha, actually. Why? Most of his work is in grass. We live on this side of the border with it, but that's where he does most of his sales. Then why did you come here instead of grass? Said the leading girl. Father doesn't hold the ninjas there in high esteem, from what I can tell. He prefers dealing with those from Konoha instead. All the girls smiled in pride at their village. You will have your father bring some of his best stuff, won't you? Said Asano. But Ariko answered. Yeah, I want to see the top fashions of grass, added Mihoshi. I'm sure they are better than the boring ones we see every day in Konoha. Wait. Come on, it'll be fun. Completed the apparent leader of the group. By the time lunch was over, Ariko's cover was as near foolproof as it could have been. However, the girls had managed to wheedle out of Ariko the promise of a show featuring his father's wares. Naruto had also learned one thing about women, that she preferred having known before making that decision about her father. Never get between women and fashion. Ichibo, on his side, had passed the majority of said time hitting the back of the female clone's head with the digits of his left hindpaw, all while purring. Meaning, in their language, I am laughing at this situation. Well, good for him. Good day, students. My name is Hyojin Kiritori, and I will be teaching you both taijutsu and weapon throwing. The Chunin said in his usual even tone. We will usually have 2 periods together, one before lunch and one before leaving for the day. The class nodded. First, I will evaluate you to see where you stand and what to fix. Please split into 2 groups, with those who have already gone through a year at this academy on one side and the rest on the other. The class split itself as asked, and the teacher started with those returning. He did each person in the group before coming to Naruto. Only a person who would have known Kiritori for a long time could have noticed the very slight tightening of the eyes the man had upon coming to stand beside the bearer of the Kyuubi seal. You have already done more than a single year in the academy, have you not? Yes, Naruto said, standing ramrod straight under the man's intense gaze. He hadn't been that way with Muramaru, but now the blonde boy found his teacher quite intimidating. Show me the first kata of the academy style then. It took a moment for Naruto to remember what that meant, but he wasted no time once he did. He performed it just as Mizuki had taught it. Horrible. Watch me, the man answered. Said person performed the kata. Naruto quickly picked up quite a few differences that made the exercise much more fluid than he'd ever seen before. Now, can you repeat what I just did? Kiritori said once he was done. Naruto did, to the best of his ability. It visibly wasn't enough. Bring your left foot towards the right, the man said as he performed the exercise. Shift your center of balance a little lower. Extend less in the third movement. The sixth must start lower. Now, repeat that kata while fixing those holes until I tell you otherwise. And trust me, if you stop. The Chunin lowered his face right next to that of his student. I will know. Naruto started over again, trying to fix the mistakes pointed out, while the teacher went to the other group. Iruka was one of the first to pass on her side. The Chunin was much less cold and rigid with her, but had her practicing the first kata nonetheless. He did physically help her in the placement of her limbs, however. As Kiritori came to Muramaru, the teacher found the boy already performing the first kata. Near perfectly, even. Very good, the man said, with a very slight smile upon his lips. It was good to have his hopes confirmed. The only issue I see is a block an inch too high on the seventh movement. Muramaru redid the whole thing, this time perfectly. His teacher nodded. Try this one then. And he launched himself in the second kata of the Academy Taijutsu. He then left Muramaru to his own devices, continuing with the other students. By the time the first part of the class was done, Muramaru was up to the fourth kata, while most had started on the second. The teacher hadn't let Naruto move on from the first, however. Uzumaki Naruto, said boy straightened from his seat. What had he done now? Don't think I haven't noticed the message you just passed. Did you think that since this was the first day, I wouldn't notice? Kazuhi, the maths and history teacher, yelled out. You will put the cap as always and go stand in the corner as usual, he added, as some students started laughing at the blonde's predicament. You will stay there facing the wall until the end of the class, when I will find a suitable punishment for you. Naruto, now in the corner, sighed. This was pretty much life as usual in this class. Nearly every day Kazuhi found an excuse to send him in the corner, and continued the class as if nothing happened. A few students always snickered at him, but they went unpunished, while he would join anybody in the corner if he did the same. The man was a master of double standards, visibly. Worse was that the Chunin was a teacher who wrote out his lesson on the board instead of explaining orally, so the punishment meant he missed nearly an entire class each time this happened. It might just have been Kazuhi's way of teaching, but Naruto was pretty much persuaded that the man went that way just to hinder him as much as possible. A class like that was always long, and he'd learned that the punishment was always worse if he didn't wait for the teacher to acknowledge the end of the class before leaving the corner. When he did, however, the man was waiting for him. As always. As punishment, since this isn't your first offense. First this year, maybe, but not in total. You will write down I will not bother other students until I come back. You will unfortunately. And his face visibly showed that he didn't find it unfortunate at all. Be missing your next class. I will be back after the teachers' meeting, and I'll keep you here if I find you haven't written enough. Is that understood? Naruto nodded, grinding his teeth. Good. I will see you later. He then left the class. Naruto nearly tossed the stick of chalk in his hand at the teacher in retaliation, but stopped himself when a better idea came to mind. Yes. So, room and board in exchange for help serving the customers 5 days a week, is that correct? Said a Naruto bunshin in the shape of a mousy brown-haired girl of 17. You got it, girl. Answered the owner of the restaurant, a heavy-set tanned man in his 30s. Deal then, the clone said, bringing his hand forward. They shook on it, and the clone was shown to her room. It was small, a little smaller than Naruto's original bedroom, but it would do. There already was a bed and a desk, and she would eat downstairs in the restaurant itself. More than enough. She was the third clone in this city, which happened to be the grass capital. She was the only girl, and the two previous already had jobs, one in a building in construction, and the other at a caravan dock. They made more money than her, even including her easy access to food, but were pretty much in the same situation as she was. As she was straightening her bed, a burst of memories came through her head. This was bizarre, as the original had instituted a near-complete memory exchange silence during the hours where the three main clones were in school, with only urgent messages being transmitted. It was the first message since classes started, so she wondered what it would be. Then she laughed. Laughing at one's own mistakes and at falling prey to pranks had become a necessary survival skill to clones, as Kage Bunshins pranking each other meant that one would get both sides of the deal. Laughing at one's own misfortune came soon after, as sometimes one got the praise side long before the pranksters. So, she laughed, all the while thinking of how to fulfill the expectations of those Konoha girls. She had passed a few clothing stores on the way, but hadn't paid much attention. This time she would, and hopefully a clone in Konoha would do the same. It wouldn't do not to have a point of comparison. Iruka stepped in the academy's meeting room a little anxious. This was make it or break it day for Naruto and his clones, and his mind had sent him treacherous images of meetings where the other teachers spoke of infiltration assignments, and guessed at which village was the cause. He hoped it was only his creativity playing with him, and not some kind of premonition. He was quickly joined by both Kazuhi and Kiritori, the first smiling, and the second as impassible as usual. As head teacher, it was his job to open the discussion, so he did. We have 36 students this year, the first full class since my arrival in the academy's service. Any issue with specific students? None whatsoever, answered the taijutsu teacher. I've tested just about every student in both throwing and academy kata, and can see no problems with the students as of now. It is of course too early to tell if any have specific issues that will need to be resolved, but everything is as it should for now. Good. Iruka nodded. That is exactly what I wanted to hear. That is, no issue with the clones. How about you, Kazuhi? Nothing unusual. The Uzumaki boy was once again disturbing the peace by passing messages, and is being punished for it right now, he said, then turned towards Kiritori. You did receive the message I had sent to you, correct? Correct, Kiritori answered. Iruka found it bizarre that Naruto would do such a thing. Especially since his usual partners in crime, Kiba and Shikamaru, were no longer in class. I will note this in the boy's record. After he'd confirmed it with said boy, of course. Anything else? Kiritori answered no in a movement of his head. The maths teacher, however, was more verbal. Nope, everything as usual. Then this meeting is over. We'll meet tomorrow at the same time. Both nodded and rose, leaving in the next step. The head teacher on his side took a moment to unwind. Everything was as planned. The clones hadn't failed in their job, and had infiltrated the school without issue. On one side the Chunin was glad of this, as this meant Naruto had this much more chance of passing, while another was dismayed a little that this had been so easy. While Naruto was good at what he did, this also showed how easy it was to infiltrate this academy. He'd have to make sure to fix this, at least as soon as Naruto and his clones were out of the academy. Yup, that's what he'd do. Erg. Iruka was interrupted in his musings by that hard yelling. Jumping out of his chair, he surged through the door, running full pace until he arrived at the maths classroom, where his college was standing, still raging. After a quick look that the other teacher was fine, Iruka turned towards the classroom. And instantly had to hold his laughter back, as it would instantly destroy whatever trust Kazuhi had for him. It was evident who had gone through here. On every surface of the class the words, "I will not bother other students," were written. And by every surface he really meant every surface. In chalk on both the blackboards, in ink on each poster, and each visible sheet of paper. In paint on the ceiling, walls, and on every single tile of the floor. Stepping inside the class, Iruka went to the teacher's desk and grabbed the maths book there. Looking through it, he saw how throughout his protege had been. Every single page was now impossible to read due to the words on every page. A quick check at 2 random books in a closet at the back of the class showed the same. That boy must be punished harshly for this. Kazuhi yelled. That boy? Kiritori said as he reached his colleague. You think a single boy made this? I must say it sounds preposterous, Iruka added, still holding back his laughter. It would take at least 10, if not 20 people acting in concert to manage such a thing. The head teacher thanked God right there that barely anyone knew of Naruto's skill in the Kage Bunshin. Hopefully it would stay that way for a while. I agree, added the taijutsu teacher. Well, he was the one alone in here being punished, responded the maths educator. I would find it more plausible that a group of people entered the room after the student left, and defaced this class hoping for this very result. I have no liking for the Uzumaki boy, but I won't have him punished for something he visibly couldn't have done, said the taijutsu teacher. Well, at the very least, he's going to be the one cleaning it, answered Kazuhi. And why is that? Said Iruka. He was supposed to stay in the room until I came back. And if it is as you said, he added, looking at Kiritori. This wouldn't have happened if he'd been still there. True. I will not oppose that. Then I'll have Naruto here before classes start to clean up. He couldn't go against both like that, and even there he wouldn't. One should clean up his messes, and that Naruto knew that well. Iruka arrived in the council room to find every single Naruto there laughing. He was pretty sure what they were laughing at. I must admit, Naruto, you haven't lost your touch. But you do know that you'll have to clean everything up tomorrow, don't you? The group looked at each other and started another round of laughter, while a single one, which I expected was the real Naruto, answered. No worries, I planned it that way. The Chunin took the last empty place at the table, and Naruto started the meeting. Welcome, all, to the meeting of those in the know. Today was the first day at the academy and, as such, the first day our prank is live. First, Iruka, status report. No suspicion amongst the teachers? None, the teacher answered, smiling. Naruto was doing well in a leadership position. The only discussion I had with the other educators was about your prank. Nothing else came up. Perfect. I do have a few questions. Ask away. The real one said, while the others turned towards the Chunin. Did you really do anything to disturb Kazuhi's class? No, sensei, answered simultaneously Naruto, Ariko and Muramaru. Nothing like that, Ichibo added. It was the blonde boy 2 desk left of Naruto, who threw a paper under his desk. Tall as this. Iruka held his hand at a specific height in the air. Wears glasses. Yes. Then I know who it is, he responded gravely. That was a returning student, and the teacher was pretty sure that he'd done it exactly to get this result. I'll take care of this. Don't worry about it, sensei, said the original student. It is better if it stays that way. Less pressure on the 2 others. Iruka nodded, even if he didn't agree. He was going to mount a file against every single abuse of power recorded against Naruto, even if he wasn't going to be able to use it while said boy was in school. He was pretty sure the Hokage would want to know anyway. Anything else? Asked the Naruto upon which Ichibo was standing. No, nothing else. So, second point, Ariko's error. Upon which moment said Bunshin yelled hey. We need to bring up what she promised. What she promised? Said Iruka. Ariko made the mistake of saying that her father was a clothes merchant from Grass. Muramaru said in a way much closer to the one the real Naruto used, but with a different tone. Before a group of girls asking questions about Ichibo. They ended up managing to have Ariko promise them a show of her father's best clothes before long. Suzuki Fumichi, Morinishi, Hayabashi Asano and Kimura Ringo? The Chunin asked. Yup, those in Okita Mihoshi. Iruka laughed at that. He heard about those. Where most of the kunoichi in the year previous had been boy-obsessed, or even Sasuke obsessed, those four were already known to be fashion obsessed. And they'd gotten a new member too. It was probably the worst choice of profession to say. Outside fashion designer, maybe. The rest of the bunshins ended up joining in the laughter, even Iruka, and it lasted a good minute. To continue, Naruto said. We'll need to have a number of clones looking at the fashions of Konoha for comparison. I'm appointing that task to you both. He pointed at the two civilian clones, Komori and Kokii. The two nodded. We've already received confirmation messages from the clones in Grass, including a few memories of current fashions, so that side is taken care of. When you find something, have Ane or Janae make the trip to Grass. They nodded again. Good. Anything else about school? All the clones either answered or shook their heads no, while Iruka raised his voice. A question actually. Go on. What's your opinion about Kiritori, the new teacher? He said, looking directly at the real Naruto. Strict with me, actually, much more than with the others, he answered. But no real complaint. He's doing his job 100 times better than Mizuki ever did. Mizuki tended towards ignoring Naruto, all the while appearing friendly when alone with Naruto. The boy now saw it for what it was, that is a way of sabotaging him while not affecting the rest of the class. He knows what he teaches, added Muramaru. He's a better taijutsu teacher than any we ever had. I'll second that, said Iruka. Then we can consider that matter closed, said Naruto as leader of the meeting, and Iruka left it at that. It would have to be good enough. The next point, the clone network. He pointed at a group of 3 bunshins with twice as much paper in front of them as the others. That's your show. Yes, said a clone in the middle, while unrolling a few maps. Here's the latest. The first map was one of Fire Country, while the second and third were both respectively of the east and west borders of said country. There were dots on all maps, though much more on the first. The only region outside the Land of Fire that had a large number of dots was Grass. As you can probably guess, the dots are the various places we have clones stationed. Most of them luckily have managed to find either jobs or shelter, if not both, but we have more than a dozen still looking. Said jobs are mainly physical work, especially for male clones, or the service industry in the case of females. None in the kind of service I am thinking of, I hope, the original Naruto said. No, but a few were asked. The closest we have to that is a bunshin working in a massage place. Good, said a few clones. The rest nodded. Iruka, however, had not yet moved his face from the maps. At first, he tried to count the dots, but quickly gave up on that as impossible. Looking wider at the regions didn't help. He shook his head quickly to try to focus, and to dispel whatever illusion was in front of him. It didn't help. Naruto really was saying that he had clones in over half Fire Country. This is really true? The Chunin said, looking up at the trio. All 3 nodded solemnly. Mind if I test that? How? Said the one in the middle. He pointed at a dot at seemingly random. Who's the one there? 2 of the clones in the trio turned to the one on the left, who started looking into a large ledger he'd been carrying. It took a few moments, but he came back with an answer. 2 clones there. Brothers. They go by the name of Mizuno. Both work in the gold mines there. Eldest is Ichiro, youngest is Taro. They live together in a small room they rented at their supervisor's suggestion. Started working there yesterday. He looked up from his reading. Is that enough for you? Iruka nodded numbly. He'd chosen that place as he'd once done a mission there, one of his last as a Chunin outside the academy. It fit what he knew of the place. That meant this whole map thing wasn't a prank on him by Naruto. Did you really manage to have Kage bunshins in half of the country in close to a week? How? The original Naruto quickly looked around. How about I answer that afterwards, sensei? I kinda want to finish this meeting as quickly as possible. Thinking for a second, Iruka realized that Naruto was afraid that people outside would notice that either the two ninja clones or the two civilian clones were missing. He personally thought that this had a very low possibility, but there was little lost in humoring the blonde. Okay. Good, then last point. He said, once again sounding like a leader. Civilian, that's you. What's been happening since the last meeting? We finally have the place we wanted, and are starting to make it ready for the shop. It cost us quite a bit more than expected, as the original owner haggled as much as possible for it. We ended up having to go over him to his boss to get anywhere, said the boy, Kokii. We will be starting civilian school sometime this week, as soon as the paperwork goes through, added her sister Komori. We should be starting to look for wares to selling either tomorrow or the very next day. Good, said the Naruto, serving as a seat to Ichibo. Hopefully everything will be perfect by the next meeting. Anyone has anything else to add? Silence answered him. Good, then this meeting is now closed. The next one will be in 3 days, where I'll be summoning Nanaboo, so be ready to explain things if needed, okay? Okay, sure, yup, the massive copies answered, and then left their seats one by one, leaving only the original Ichibo and Iruka in the room. Now, about this explanation, asked the Chunin. Can we talk while walking? Naruto responded, rising. While walking? You wanted me to fix the mess I made in Kazuhi's class, no? He was silent for a moment. Yes, right, he said, rising. He'd completely forgotten about it for now. Ichibo, stay here. I'll be back as soon as I'm done, Naruto added towards his rider. Said Rabbit jumped off. Be back soon, he said, waving. Naruto did not start talking until the two of them were in the tunnels. Now, explaining, he said. How much do you know about the Kagebunshin? The teacher opened his mouth to answer, only to close it back up less than a second later. Not much, I must say, he finally responded. Now, I've been doing tests with this technique ever since I learned it, and I'm probably one of the people who know this technique the best, the student said. So, I know that calling it only a clone is like saying a ninja is only a soldier. It is, in a way, true, but only a part of the whole. The Kagebunshin is a jutsu that makes a copy of everything the user is as a shell to contain an amount of raw chakra. Depending on how real you make the shell, it will both consume more chakra to maintain itself, and be an exact copy deeper. Deeper? Yup, deeper. Making a sign with both hands, he summoned a single clone beside him. Look. The clone took his kunai and started cutting his way into his hand. For an instant Iruka even saw bone, before blood obscured his vision. The clone dispelled itself soon afterwards. See? He did. But that wasn't what had stuck to his mind. How come it didn't dispel itself from the damage? Because I made it more real. It burns chakra like water though, and it wouldn't have lasted more than 10 minutes at that, the boy answered. The ones usually created have nothing but a paper-thin layer that's real, and that's why they're dispelled so easily. The ones I make now have a few millimeters of real surface, which is what I found the best in terms of toughness to time ratio. Along with all of that is a copy of the user's mind and memories, so that the clone can act independently and use whatever skills its creator has. That still doesn't explain how you managed to build a network like yours in a week. I'm getting there, he answered. Now what makes my clones dangerous is that they have a way of draining chakra. And that there's chakra everywhere. Everywhere? Everywhere. Trees have chakra. Grass has chakra. Even the air has chakra. Chakra. It's different from human chakra, or so my clones say, but they can subsist on it. Now let's imagine one of my clones on a road. He basically has as much chakra as it wants, since it can drain the very environment when he needs to. Say this clone makes another every time the road forks. How many clones will there be in the end? One for every fork on the road, Iruka answered quickly. Nope. One for every fork on every road. Because the copy made at the first fork will also make a clone when it gets to a fork, as will every clone he makes. And every clone his clones make. And every clone. I think I got it now, the Chunin said, stopping his student. It wasn't addition, it was multiplication. No wonder Naruto had been able to do so much in so little time. Why haven't you taken over the village or something? With the manpower you have it would be easy. 'Cause the clones aren't without their weaknesses. Even removing damage, they are naturally weak against chakra. How so? You know the Genjutsu dispelling method? The Chunin nodded. Naruto made another clone. Use it on this one. He did, not expecting anything, and was surprised when the Bunshin burst into smoke. Why? Simple. Most applications of chakra on the shell that is a clone disturb his containment ability, dispelling it. Someone powerful enough could actually go around dispelling hundreds at will, and it's not like ninja villages lack people who know how. The main reason my clones can spread easily like this is that nobody tests if they are real. Security through obscurity, really. The teacher nodded. And now that we're there, I'm going to show you another thing I found about the Kage Bunshin Jutsu. There. A quick look around revealed to Iruka that the two of them were but a dozen meters from the academy, and he hadn't even noticed. He just focused on Naruto's words, and didn't realize the distance they were covering. It seemed that Naruto could make an efficient teacher also. Unlocking the door, Iruka led the academy student to the class he had pranked. Opening the door and the lights, he motioned Naruto to come inside. Now, what else did you want to show me? He said, smiling. His favorite student was still full of surprises. He wondered for an instant if he could manage to have Naruto teach him his favorite technique. Watch. Naruto took a marker from the teacher's desk, put it in his pocket, then made another clone. And what is so special about this? The clone took out the marker, uncapped it, and started doodling on a desk, making the words already there illegible. Hey! Iruka yelled, but his student silenced him with a simple sign of the hand. The clone quickly finished his job, covering half the desk with black ink, then turned towards its summoner. 2 minutes? It asked. Perfect, Naruto answered. The clone then dispelled itself. And the desk was back in its original, albeit written on, state. How? Iruka said, once again. This seemed to be his word of the day. When you make a clone, you clone everything. You don't summon a naked, weaponless copy, do you? No. Well, a Kage Bunshin is the same. Everything is copied. That also means that everything disappears once the clone does, which include paint, ink and the like. Watch. The both of them waited for a minute, then everything written, outside of the lines on the board, vanished without a trace. The only issue with cloning objects is that the objects have the same resistance as the clone, that is to say none. And dispelling an object dispels the clone, along with every object that was created with it. That's why one doesn't clone food. That was actually how Naruto had found out. A clone had offered cloned ramen to a group of Bunshins, planning to dispel itself once they were all eating. The joke turned on him when he disappeared after the first bite. After looking around one last time, the teacher turned towards the student. Then I grade you A+ in pranking, with a perfect score. Surprising, efficient, harmless while not seeming so, and easily removed. I'll tell the other teachers that I had you come during the night to clean it off. He smiled, and then ruffled Naruto's hair with his hand. Now go. I'm pretty sure Ichibo's waiting for you, and that you have a lot to do. Teacher and student then each went their own way, both with a smile on his face. Chapter 10, Discussions and Discoveries. Prank Day 3. Summoning Technique. Naruto called out, slamming his hand into the ground. For the third time tonight, smoke came out at this call, in this instance much more than before. When it dispersed, Nanaboa was standing there, arms crossed. See, I told you weren't using enough, Ichibo added. How's it going, Kage? The usual. And you? The rabbit boss said, passing the time while Naruto recovered. The boy currently was inhaling in great gulps, sweat shining on his brow. Great. There's so much new stuff here I can't even know where to start. It beats the prank wars with Raibo any day. Good. I'll summon you for a meeting sometime next week. He said, smiling, then bent towards Naruto. You gonna be okay, partner? It took a few seconds for the student to answer. Hopefully it won't take this much each time. It had actually tired him more than when he'd mass-summoned clones when training towards chakra draining. He finally straightened back up. The plan's working, so pretty good, partner. He extended his hand. They shook, smiling. So, you're gonna bring me up to speed on this prank of yours? Yup, Naruto answered. It all started less than a month ago, actually. It was the final exam at the academy and I passed the whole morning training in summoning. That's pretty much it. Naruto finished, stretching on his chair. Nanaboho nodded, thinking. Calling it a prank wasn't descriptive enough, even though that was certainly part of it. It was prank, long-term infiltration, revenge and legal manipulation all at the same time. It had managed to make him laugh quite a few times, especially the various retaliations to Naruto's maths teacher, but the goal of this wasn't simple laughter. It was much more. He didn't need to do anything about it. It seemed that the newest member of his court had things well in hand anyway. So then, he would help where he could. And how are going your own studies? The rabbit asked. Good enough. Naruto shrugged. Right now, I'm working on modifying the Kage Bunshin to be used only for communication, but progress is slow. Not much outside of that. That's not enough. The summon said. A few hand signs later Miyamoto appeared in a burst of smoke. The smaller rabbit bowed at its leader right as he appeared. I come as summoned. What is your bidding, Shogun? He asked instantly. Miyamoto, Nanaboho said, in an official tone. Is it true you haven't yet found someone to teach your techniques? Yes. I'm sure you remember the newest member of our clan. Would you be able to teach him? Well, Miyamoto answered, visibly deep in thought. He has the necessary frame, which is something most rabbits lack. And he has proven he can learn, so I do not see why not. Naruto, the rabbit leader said, cutting towards the boy who had stayed silent during the latest exchange. The rabbit clan is all about both teaching and learning. One learns the techniques of the clan, and uses these to discover new techniques or modify old ones. Then he or she teaches those to the clan, and the circle goes on. Right. Miyamoto here hasn't found anybody that was both able and willing to learn the sword from him. Would you do him the honor of being his student? Naruto thought for a moment. He'd already worked with Miyamoto, and he'd found the rabbit strict but respectful, something which wasn't a problem. However, that would be cutting into his training time, and he had quite a few ideas he wanted to try out. In the end, however, one point came above the others. Swords were cool, and he'd be cooler using one. Sure, the academy student answered with his usual smile. Could I also learn? Said Ichibo from his perch on Naruto's head. I cannot stop you from trying. Responded the sword-wielding rabbit. But you would find it much more difficult. Most rabbits your size does not have the necessary strength in the arms and fingers to properly wield a one-handed weapon, not to mention the issue of finding a sword the right size. I will not send you away when training your partner, however. Good, the summon leader said, smiling, and the seriousness of the moment evaporated in an instant. We'll work on the details later. Now, pranks. What do you have planned? Smiling himself, Naruto answered. Well, there's this one I have. Wahahaha. You have to get me here for that one. I know a genjutsu that'll complement that prank perfectly. Nanaboa said, repeated hitting the ground with his left paw. Naruto had quickly noticed that whenever the rabbit laughed hard enough, he unconsciously did so. Some kind of nervous tic, probably. Glad to have you there. I'll make sure to give you a call once I have the timing down. The boy answered, smiling. Perfect. Now is there anything else on the plan? The bunny leader asked. Well, they're a meeting of those in on the prank a little later, so you might want to be present for that, but outside that I didn't have anything planned out. Nanaboa thought about it for a minute. He was about to say yes, but held back at the last moment. He'd nearly not realized, but Ichibo had barely said a dozen words since he'd started talking to the boy. While his grandson could be direct with him in private, he tended to stay silent and defer to him much too much while in public. The small rabbit would be much more active if he was absent. No need. Ichibo, you'll be speaking for the rabbits in my stead, okay? Ichibo tensed. You sure, Kage? Perfectly. I'm sure you'll do a good job as my voice. The rabbit on Naruto's head nodded. Then, Naruto, I'll be waiting for your call about that prank. Don't forget to call on Miyamoto every night for training at the very least. Will do. See you, partner, Nanaboa said, waving. Naruto waved back, and the summon disappeared. Prank Day 6. The village was abandoned, and had been for quite some time. It was situated about halfway between Konoha and the border to grass, deep in the forests of Fire Kingdom. The Naruto that had found it guessed from the buildings that it had been some sort of logging camp, but that was all he could tell, really. Its exact position and its current state made it a perfect meeting spot for the various clones of Naruto who were in charge of the trading network. These bunshins were originally 3, but ended up having to multiply themselves to keep up with the multiplying copies that were spreading everywhere in the ninja world. They were now more than a dozen. The way they increased in number was simple. Originally, the 3 each took care of an area, meaning either east, west, or fire itself. But as the number of clones infiltrating various places grew, there started being too much for a single person to track. The clone in charge of that area created new bunshins either as secretaries, or split his territory in smaller increments. And the process repeated itself when too much work started piling up once again. The entire group was inside the building which looked the most stable, around a table that was actually a clone, as no furniture intact enough was found. They were grouped as per their respective region. Okay people, this is our 3rd meeting, said the bunshin in charge, who was officially head of the region of Konoha. Anyone has anything urgent to bring to the table, or can we get directly to the agenda? No one said anything. Then let's get to it. First, clothes for Iruka. Status? A clone rose from his seat in response. The only difference between him and the other Narutos was the set of goggles he wore around his upper left arm, the symbol of the jumpers. I brought the package to Konoha yesterday night, and delivered it directly to her place. That was what jumpers did. They used the Kawarimi jutsu to jump distances and bring packages. They were only few as of now, but their number was expected to grow quickly. Good, 1 down. Second is, we have our first stock from outside Konoha. I know it isn't much, but it's gonna be enough as samples to see if those items are worth it. We have spices, medicinal plants, silk and a crate of Hakutocho peaches. Jine, an A. He nodded to the civilian clone parents. You're leaving with those. We'll be expecting news as soon as you have them. They both nodded in return. This would actually be their first task as an actual part of the network. Anything to add about this? Silence answered him. 3 then. Maps. A pair of bunshin stepped up and unrolled a map nearly as long as the table. The leaders of the network had switched from the smaller ones to this cloth representation when issues of scale became evident between the various maps. As of yesterday, we now have a team in both Rice Field Country and in Northern Tea Country, which means we now have members in 7 different countries. By this time next week, we should be in even 10 countries, provided that the team to wave country can find a boat to ride on. Clones nodded left and right in agreement. The team to wave was already 5 days late, and it seemed it could continue in that vein for a while. This brings us to our last point, catalogs. He brought a rolled scroll to the table. We have the first draft of the list of products the network could get his hands on, along with the estimated prices. The T-Country products are not yet there, as the group arrived only early this morning. He brought out other scrolls, copies of the first. I'm expecting region heads to come after the meeting to get one. Any last words before we close the meeting? As usual, only silence answered. Then, meeting closed. The next one is in a week in Warehouse 4. Let's get back to work, people. The clone leading the meeting clapped in hands twice and rose, as did everyone else. Most walked or jumped out, with only a few remaining. Jine and Ine walked to the person who was, if only nominally, their superior. Are all meetings like this? The Bunshin impersonating the father asked. What, you expected anything else? We're all Narutos, so long meetings would kill us with our mediocre attention span for such things. Fast and loose is the way to go. He tossed a catalog to the head of Eastern Fire Country. Besides, it works. That's what's important in the end. The supposed parents couldn't find any way to refute that. Prank Day 9. Okay, now what? Said the leading clone back to the group. This particular group was one of the 5 training in the new elemental techniques, with the one assigned to them being Katan, Akaraka Jigoki. As it often happened within clone ranks, the whole jutsu learning had become somewhat of a competition being the various teams. Boasting led every group to proclaim that they would finish first, and now each was stuck trying to back their words. I don't know. Let me get the scroll, said another Bunshin, who then took off in a run. The other members had nothing else to add, so they only focused at keeping the black balls over their hands stable. Those balls were the core of the technique, a sort of shell upon within which you built the fireball, or so they understood. Those balls could be thrown, though distance quickly made stability an issue, and would burst upon contact with anything solid, releasing the flames inside. They hadn't actually found what made the technique dangerous as of yet. They knew the scroll mentioned most students having died due to accidents in training, but most failures they had encountered released fire similar in amount to that of that fire breath technique Naruto had seen Sasuke use, and not much more. Enough to burst a clone, sure, but hardly deadly enough to be banned by ninja standards. The clone came back with another, this one holding the scroll. Standard practice, actually, with all the techniques that sometimes went out of control around this room. They hadn't another physical set of copies of the Scroll of Forbidden Seals. It just hadn't come up. The leading clone grabbed and unrolled the scroll and started reading out loud. Dragon, reverse tiger, dragon. Focus chakra above the palm of either hand. Form of a black ball, constant concentration. Aha. He intoned. After having generated a stable ball, one can now feed the technique fire aspect chakra using his other hand, increasing the heat so contained, he quoted directly from the paper. He then looked at the whole group. Silence ruled for a second. So, how does someone generate fire aspect chakra? No clue, said the leader, and this was visibly the general opinion. We'll need to find out. Hours later, they hadn't advanced a single more inch. There was nothing as such in the copies of the academy textbooks they had. The other Katan technique scrolls only referred to it without explaining what it was, and they all other clones had no clue what it was or how it was formed. In the end, they kept working on generating and maintaining the sphere, and would think about how to find a solution. At worst, if they found nothing, they'd petition to ask Iruka at the next council meeting. They were at an impasse, otherwise. Prank Day 11. Do a little turn, exclaimed Ringo. Ariko rolled her eyes. Turn. 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 The others took up as a chant. Ariko obligatorily did a turn, causing the skirt to twirl along with her. The 5 girls before her watched in rapt attention as it did. "I like that shade of orange." "Amber, right?" said Ringo. "Yes, but the previous ensemble went much better with her skin tone," countered Fumichi. "This skirt flutters so prettily." "Is it silk, or something else?" added Mihoshi. Discussions intersected questions as the group argued upon the merits of the latest ensemble. Ariko answered as best as she could, though she had realized she was in over her head. And how? Just in the last 2 hours, she had learned the names of 24 shades of green, and at least half that in red, yellow and orange separately. And what kind of color name was atomic tangerine anyhow? And that's not counting cuts or materials. Ariko, being Naruto, had had a very limited wardrobe for most of her memories, and rarely opportunities to buy new clothes before the start of the prank. Naruto's well-known bright orange shinobi outfit had actually been delivered to his door one day, and Naruto, and the clones, by extension, were pretty sure the old man had something to do with that. And they were right, somewhat. After a meeting where the boy had complained not being able to buy this piece of required ninja equipment, the third had ordered the ANBU to drop said piece of clothing at the boy's door. He'd even specified that there should not be any tracking seals or other surprises of the sort. The ninja who received the request had the bright idea of finding the required object in the most visible of available colors, as he'd been hunting said boy after a prank often enough. He thought it would help. Needless to say, Naruto loved it, and it did not help in any way. "So, which one do you prefer?" asked Fumichi as the discussing died down. Ariko didn't know what to answer. To her male eyes, none were something she would willingly wear, outside a prank, of course. As something for ninja, they all failed, being far from solid enough to withstand active service, and from his limited civilian point of view all were equally comfortable. Well, the skirt bothered him some, but that was because a man shouldn't wear such things, and not any other reason. In the end, she answered what she could. "None of them, really. I prefer the suit I usually wear at the academy over all of them." It was the best she could come up with. The rest of the group sighed in near-perfect harmony. "You're such a tomboy, Ariko," said Ringo. The clone, of course, was in no way insulted by this. "Your mother is dead, right?" added Asano. "Asano. We don't ask such things." Fumichi, the leader of the group, replied, cuffing the girl lightly on the shoulder. The effect was completely lost when she turned towards Ariko with expectant eyes, visibly desiring the answer like the others. Ariko acted as if the question surprised her, mainly to gain time to think. Neither she or any other Naruto clone had worked out much of her history or family, so she didn't know what to answer. As this was the second time this happened, she mentally noted that she'd have to get together with a few other clones and work out a complete history, and that sooner than later. But now, answering was first. She decided to go along with it, as it would be difficult to argue otherwise. She also supposed it was factually true, as Naruto had none he could call mother. "Yes," she answered, bowing her head. "And you were raised by your father alone, or only with other men, right?" "Right," she said, as this was actually the truth. Iruka and the old man were the primary figures in his life, and both were male. "I knew it," Fumichi said. "Wait. How did they know that? How did you find out?" the Bunshin asked. "I've known 3 types of tomboys. There are those who are raised as tomboys because their mothers were tomboys, those who refuse to act like their mothers and so act like tomboys, and those who are raised by men and act like them without knowing any better. The first type knows somewhat about cosmetics, fashion and such stuff, as their mother will have taught them what little they know. The second knows most, however willingly doesn't care or apply it in any way. Only the third type really doesn't know." She then turned around. "So, girls, one of our number need our help in learning what it is to be a woman. What do you say about that?" she asked the rest of the group. All smiled. "Let's go. Let's go." replied Ringo, visibly eager. Turning back to her, Fumichi was smiling herself. Today then, we're gonna teach you about fashion, using the sacred female art of people watching. Ariko was then dragged to an ice cream shop in the middle of the business district, and had to comment on the people passing by. Like, this man is a well-to-do peasant or a down-on-his-luck merchant. Her colleges were simply better, however. A peasant in his best clothes, said Nishi. This cut is quite out of fashion, and he visibly isn't used to wearing them. A successful merchant going to do something dirtying, pointed out Mihoshi. While most of what he wears is old and used, he's wearing new fashionable sandals, and the bracelet he wears seems to be worth quite a bit. How about this group? Asked Ariko, pointing at a group of 3 children playing together. Just to see what they could say. The girl. I'd say minor nobility. She has a posture like she's used to getting her way, and most non-nobles wouldn't let a child out to play with a pendant, replied Fumichi. The 2 boys are peasant sons, visibly, added Ringo while taking a bite of her ice cream. Resistant clothes. Shades that hide dust well and clean easily. Left one works the earth with his parents, probably, pointed out Asano. You can see the earth stains that don't wash out on his knees. Maybe there was something to this fashion thing after all. Prank Day 15. Iruka was finishing work alone at the academy. It wasn't anything new. Being head teacher had its perks, a somewhat higher salary and more authority, but also had its disadvantages, such as the extra work that tended towards late hours. The Chunin had forgotten how many times he had to beg off a diner or a drink, simply to continue working. But in this case, it was an advantage. The current academy class just had their first history exam, and Iruka wanted a look at Naruto and his 2 clones' work. Not that he wanted to change anything. No. He just wanted to make sure the tests wouldn't give clues pointing toward the infiltrating copies. He'd only change answers if he really needed to. Grateful for the fact that he was alone in the building, Iruka infiltrated his coworker Kazuhi's office, and took out the latest test papers. Less than a minute later he had the 3 answer sheets lined up on the desk, and started poring over them. 97 for Ariko. Iruka thought. 71 for Muramaru and 45 for Naruto. A quick look revealed nothing incriminating. Iruka was of 2 minds about bringing the subject up to Naruto. On one side, if he gave the teachers what they expected, they'd be less curious about him. On the other, Naruto didn't really need to use the prank to pass. It would be much better if he went through on his own efforts. Then again, the teacher thought. It's obvious from Ariko's results that he masters the material. He started going down the questions, comparing them one by one. Naruto hadn't won himself any points by writing down "don't care" as the answer to question 9. Then Iruka came to question 13 out of 20. Ariko's answer was picture perfect, an exact textbook answer, which netted her 5 points. Muramaru's was similar, with some difference in vocabulary, which was worth again 5 points. But it was the same with Naruto, and on his sheet was written a red 0 beside the answer. Iruka reread the 3 answers one after the other. All had the same core meaning, the same information, with only some differences in vocabulary. Yet Naruto got a 0 where the others gained points. Iruka froze at the implications. They jumped into action. A few seconds later the original tests were back into their drawer, while Iruka had brought out last year's final exam. And again, the same pattern came up. Even worse. Sometimes Naruto's answer was the exact same as the one of another student, and always was Naruto's ranked lower. Now fully into the chase, Iruka brought out everything. All the tests, all the notes, all the graded assignments Naruto had done since entering the academy. He didn't go in details, passing over quickly, focusing on the questions with the worst results, comparing them to others in his class. He quickly came to the very conclusion he'd been afraid of. Naruto should have passed long ago. His report card for his first year at the academy had him fail by less than 3%, and that was including everything, such as his taijutsu, borderline pass, and his ninjutsu, total fail. Iruka's recalculation would have brought Naruto final score by at least 5 points, if not more. Continuing on, the second year was the same. However, Naruto was already visibly starting to make less effort. The number of missing assignments increased, the answers became less worked on and more rushed, and his notes were lower, even in Iruka's recalculations. This time the teacher wasn't sure if Naruto would have actually passed or failed. His scores were just too much on the limit to tell. Then coming to the third year, Iruka noticed something else. He'd not realized before, but last year was the third time in a row that the final ninjutsu examination was on the bunshin. Thinking back, he remembered Mizuki suggesting it last year, while he couldn't remember how the decision was made the year before. Some people might think it coincidence, but Iruka doubted the existence of the word when it came to Naruto. There was simply too much for that. "Iruka, are you there?" said a voice. The teacher jumped out of his chair at the sound, only to recognize Naruto's voice. "Here," he said in answer, then was hit by a wave of guilt as he looked down at the piles of exam paper. While he hadn't joined in the oppression, he'd been head teacher, so it was his responsibility to ensure that every student had a good education. And he flubbed it. "Is everything okay, sensei?" "You were supposed to be at the meeting 30 minutes ago," his student said. A quick look at the clock confirmed those words. It was already past 10. He'd been so into it he hadn't noticed. Turning to look at his young charge, Iruka didn't know what to say. How could he explain? He had to, however. Naruto deserved that, in spades. Spades. "Naruto," Iruka said, his voice low. "Take a seat." The boy did, his face questioning all the while. The Chunin teacher knew he wasn't acting as Naruto was used to, so he wasn't surprised. "I'm sorry, Naruto," the adult said as soon as his student was fully in his seat. "I failed you." The boy went as though he wanted to interrupt, but Iruka stopped him with a hand and continued. "I've been going through your latest history exam, just to make sure you hadn't inadvertently given your teacher any clue when I found something." "Damn," Naruto said, hitting his open left hand with his fist. "I thought I had done well enough. Is the prank in danger? Or is Kazuhi only suspicious?" He put both his hand forward as if praying. "Please tell me it's only suspicion." "Nothing like that," answered Iruka, inwardly cursing the fact that he'd given the wrong idea. "There's really no other way to say it." He added gravely. "Naruto, your teachers failed you on purpose. You should have passed 3 years ago." Iruka dropped his head in shame. "And I didn't notice before now." There was an uncomfortable silence for a minute or so, then the teacher brought his head back up. Looking at the face Naruto was making hurt. Broken was the only description that fit in his mind. Nevertheless, he soldiered on. He explained how he just noticed, how the notes had been changed. He gave his revised scores and explained when he should or should not have been promoted. It took a good hour. The Chunin then went back to silence to let his student process the information. It wasn't long before Naruto answered. "So what? What happens now?" he said, his voice sad beyond measure. "Now depends on you, Naruto. If you want, I'll go right this minute to the Hokage with what I found. He will not be happy with hearing what I have to say, but I'm sure he'll promote you to genin on the spot, along with some form of punishment for those who wronged you." "I don't know if you'll get a team right away," Iruka continued, "as that depends on how many genin students and jonin teachers are currently available. You'd have to drop your prank, however," the teacher added as an addendum. Naruto reacted to this, however. "And what would you recommend?" the boy said in a small voice. Iruka thought for a good moment about this. He loathed what he was about to say, but it was what was best in his mind for his student. "Personally, I'd recommend keeping the course and finishing the year. Your notes from last year show that you visibly need to revise the basics, especially in maths and history. With all the students graduating, I'm 100% sure that getting a teen won't be an issue, nor will getting a Jonin-sensei be one. And don't worry," he added with a growl in his voice. "I won't be forgiving this. I am already building a report on the favoritism of the teachers, and this will feature preeminently in it." The idea that someone would go to such lengths to hurt a child was horribly revolting to him. No need for. Seeing the face Naruto made with that start, Iruka cut him off. "Yes, there is need. If it happened once, it can happen again. And I will not have had a child hurt simply because some people think he doesn't deserve what he worked for. I will have to live with not noticing what they did to you for the rest of my life, but I will not compound that mistake by letting them get away with it. And that is final." Naruto shrank back at those words. He'd never seen Iruka so violently passionate, outside possibly the beginning of his battle against his co-teacher Mizuki. Then he smiled. A passion like that he could respect in a teacher. "I won't say anything else about it then," Naruto said. "And we'll go with what you said about school. I'm kinda curious how far the prank can go, anyhow." He was smiling all the while. Looking at Naruto, Iruka saw through the smile the boy was giving the words he knew Naruto meant, and those words were a balm to his soul. To the Chunin, that smile meant all is forgiven, and that was all he really needed to have. Fumichi 1. Nishi 2. Asano 3. Mihoshi 4. Ringo 5. Chapter 11, Pranks Aplenty. Prank Day 17. Officially, the Special Assassination and Tactical Squad, otherwise known as the ANBU, occupied 3 different buildings. These were of course simply decoys. The real ANBU office was a single completely different building in the opposite part of town, hidden within a trading company's offices. It was guarded day and night by at least a dozen different shinobi. This changed nothing for Naruto, however. He had long ago learnt how to get near said office unseen at certain hours, where the shadows were deep enough for him to crawl there without being visible. He knew of 5 people, smokers, who tended to leave their windows open, and the best time to dodge the lines of sight of the rooftop patrols. He could get in the building undetected any day. Nanaboa's Jinjutsu was overkill, really. Once inside, he followed a preset path he remembered from long ago, back when he was younger. After a set of pretty bad days, he'd been shifted into ANBU custody while said ninjas tried finding out what had happened. Which, unfortunately, they never did. Nevertheless, that meant that a young Naruto Uzumaki lived along the ANBU for nearly a month, eating in their cafeteria and sleeping on their couches. He even had a locker with what little possessions he owned at the time. And that was where he was heading. With silent gestures he directed the elder rabbit within the winding corridors of the building, while Ichibo served as a lookout from his usual position from the crown of Naruto's hair. The student was gradually leading both summons toward the place where the ANBUs left their mask when not on duty. Once inside, the room was never locked. In case of urgent summons, the trio quickly pushed the whole section of lockers off the wall, and gained access to their contents by removing the back panel, bypassing the security of even the most paranoid ANBU ninja this way. "Now, look carefully," Nanaboa said in a whisper, his paws starting to move. Hare, serpent, rat, reverse tiger, hare. He then reached out and touched the ANBU mask in the locker before him. "The important part of this technique is the state of mind of the user," he continued in his low tone. "He must have firmly in mind the thought that everything is normal. Practice it while I set up the rest of the stuff." He reached out and grabbed a scroll hanging from the side of Naruto's backpack. Naruto's first try failed, as did his second, third, and such all the way to the 17th. "You're using too much. Try the minimum you can," said Ichibo from his perch. Try was the key word here. The jutsu failed to hold again. "Still too much," the black rabbit answered. "I can't put out any less than that. It's already difficult enough to get that little," he whispered, remembering not to shout at the last second. Nanabowo came back from the locker he was working on at that very instant. "Show me, partner." The student did. Again, the rabbit leader said, and once again Naruto complied. The summon shaked his head. "Try this one. Hare, serpent, rat, reverse tiger, serpent, dragon, reverse rat, dragon, hare. Remember the state of mind." The boy nodded and tried again. This time, the technique held by the third attempt. "Good work," the elder summon said as he lightly slapped Naruto's shoulder. He would have ruffled the student's hair, but Ichibo's presence made that impossible. "The jutsu you just did is an advanced version of the other one. It is both harder to notice by the affected person and harder to dispel in general, but generally too intensive for my pranks. I unfortunately cannot cast it over and over as I can with the other one," he noted, scratching his chin. "By the amount you've put out in the last few minutes, I don't think you'll have an issue." He smiled. "Now let's go on." The group went back to work and had whole place done before 20 more minutes had elapsed. Prank Day 18. Ikazuchi Oboro was officially a Chunin of the Leaf, and had been so for the past 10 years. He tried 3 times his chance at a Jonin promotion and failed all 3. He was good enough, though somewhat lacking in leadership. He was usually on long-range courier or infiltration missions, and rarely in Konoha at all. At least, that's what most documents would have you believe. Reality, as usual, was somewhat different. Ikazuchi Oboro was really a career ANBU, acting under the identity of Bat. He was one of the many who patrolled the town of Konoha proper, acting as both police and counter-espionage officers. And he'd been doing said job for the past 5 years. He was well known for a mix of sound-based jinjutsus and ninjutsus that he used effectively for both stealth and combat purposes. And no, his parents were not killed in front of him while he was young by career criminals, unless by young you mean 16, and that the QB is a career criminal. He was in position, overlooking the merchant district, when his superior rat signed for a hidden meeting in their usual spot. A quick shunshin brought him there, and his captain appeared the same way a second later. "Inspect your belongings, ANBU." A surprise inspection? Now, Oboro thought. Nevertheless, his hands automatically went through the motions of checking his equipment. Armor, in place. Sword, also. Holsters, present and full. Mask, worn and undamaged. Rainbow wig, still there. He even went and confirmed that his poofy nose was still glued on. All equipment present and accounted for, Captain. Rat visibly reacted under the mask, something which was evident to anyone used to ANBU. "You are summoned before the Hokage at once." "Go," he said, visibly sighing. That explains the inspection, at least, he thought. "Yes, sir." Another shunshin brought him out. "Bat reporting as ordered, Hokage-sama," he said. Said person wasn't alone. The commander-in-chief of the ninja forces, Shikaku Nara, was there, along with both the ANBU commander and Kurenai Yuhi. He was pretty sure by now that something was up, but he couldn't see what it was. The snickers from the ANBUs watching the entrance had been illuminating in that regard. "Bat, turn to the side." He did so instantly, coming face to face with a mirror. "Tell me what you see." "Myself, Hokage-sama." "More details, please." "Myself in ANBU suit, Hokage-sama." The village leader didn't stop him, so he continued. "I am wearing my regulation armor over a black suit, with my sword strapped at my back. My mask is as usual half lime green and half hot pink, with a blue teardrop on the pink side and a purple star on the pink side, both below the eyes. My regulation poofy nose is in place, as are my exaggerated eyebrows. My multicolor wig is in proper position and still curly. Should I go in more detail?" "No, that will be enough, Bat." Besides him, the ANBU commander did a facepalm. "Continue looking at the mirror." He did so. It barely took a moment before Kurenai brought her fingers in a ram seal. Kai. At that very instant, Oboro instantly noticed what was wrong. He quickly ripped out the nose and the eyebrows, and the wig joined them on the floor barely an instant later. The paint on the mask proved more resistant, however, so it ended up staying. Hokage-sama, I have no excuse, he quickly realized. He remembered the previous hours perfectly, and could not think of anything else to add. Do with me as you will, he said, head down. A ninja came down and gathered the items he had just removed, and added them to the contents of a box. Judging by the number of noses and eyebrows, he wasn't the only one who'd fallen to this prank. There even was a full ANBU mask in the box. It had a horn, like that of a unicorn. Bat, return to the ANBU quartermaster, who will give you a new mask. Then, please have Hamster sent our way. The ANBU and the clown mask wasted no time in leaving, glad to have gotten out of any horrible punishment. Once he was gone, Sarutobi turned toward the Jonin next to him. So, what are your thoughts, Kurenai-san? I have never seen the like, she answered. Most genjutsus affect the five senses: sight, smell, touch, taste and hearing. A few rare go directly to the sense of balance while bypassing the others. The only woman in the room was visibly thinking. But I've never heard of something like this one. The technique behind this prank somehow affects one's perception of normality, making the subject of this jutsu seem perfectly normal to everyone noticing it. I have no clue where such a technique could come from. Not from Konoha for sure. Thank you, Kurenai-san. Please write down anything you can think that might help, the Hokage said as a ninja with a carrot-like nose and exaggerated lips came in. He sighed. Anything, he quickly added. The third could finally, as the other ninjas had left, indulge in a somewhat inappropriate laugh. As a leader of men he had to stay calm to the situation, but as a person he could not help but laugh. All the while he'd had the various ANBUs in his office, he couldn't help but think Naruto would laugh at this. And that was the crux of the issue. This was very much a Naruto-style prank, but the genjutsu made it impossible for him to perform. As if an academy student with issues in the simplest of techniques could perform a genjutsu Konoha's foremost mistress of the art had no knowledge of. And where would he have learnt it anyway? In the end, 16 ANBUs were found with tampered masks, while a search of the lockers found 20 more still unused. The prankster, however, was never caught, the only clue they found being the smell of rabbits. Prank Day 21. So, report. Anybody found anything? Said the clone leading this group to the numerous other copies before him. A stream of no in various formats were his answer from his partners at Learning Katan, Akaraka Jigoki. They were well and truly stuck. Which is not to say they did nothing. They had kept on training with the black spheres, managing even something similar to dodgeball in the last few days, but nothing on how to fill said constructs with the fire. Any clue on how to proceed? The clone added. Again, all answers were of the negative sort. The clone sighed. Whatever lead they might have had in the informal competition between the Jutsu Learning Bunshin was evaporating like mist at high noon, if it hadn't vanished completely already. Another of the blonde copies was looking around. Shouldn't we be more than this? The leader did a quick head count and realized that this Naruto was right. They were missing at least 3 people, and he didn't remember any part of his group bursting since the last meeting. The group as a whole debated for a few minutes on what to do about this, when the point became moot. One of those missing had arrived. A few clones went and started questioning, while others just stared out, waiting for answers. We might have a solution. And then he had all ears. He basked in the feeling for a while, then gave a single instruction. Follow. The group did, and he led them through the sewers to a grate that hadn't seen much usage, by the looks of it. The leading clone stopped right beside the ladder going up. We all went the wrong way about this. We mainly focused about how, when we should have put effort on who and where. So, tell me, the clone asked. who were the best known in Konoha for their fire techniques. Smirking, he then climbed the ladder 3 rungs at the time. When each member of the Keton group finally were back on ground level and saw where they were, they all wanted to hit themselves. The answer was evident, and they hadn't even thought of it. Before them was the Uchiha district, which had long been home to some of the most famous fire users in history. The technique they were trying to learn was even based on stealing that very power from exactly this family. Naruto had, long before the start of the prank, tried infiltrating the Uchiha district, mostly as a way to escape his pursuers. It had bounced back on him, as all points of entry were alarmed 3 ways from Sunday. That particular chase was cut very short at that point, and he got a double lecture and punishment for his trouble. But now they had a way to bypass such seals, and the 2 other missing clones were already doing so, negating the alarms on a half-hidden side door in the walls of the district. The group quickly made its way inside, while the pair of bunshins kept their position, maintaining the hole in the wards. "So, what now, boss?" the guiding copy said. Said clone looked around for an instant before replying. "You found this, so it's your show," he answered with a smile. The rest of the group nodded their approval. The new leading bunshin looked around for a moment. Even if he hadn't known of what had happened here in the past, he could have guessed. While there were no bodies or blood in sight, the signs were evident. Charred spots on the walls, the results of fire jutsu, could be seen here and there, leftover marks from kunai and shuriken dotted the place, and there were gouges in the grounds from the usage of ninja techniques. Any ninja worth his salt would have noticed what had gone on here. We split into 3 groups. The first 2 will go methodically and create a clone while holding anything interesting, especially whatever looks like a jutsu scroll. We then put it back where it was. Be careful about traps, as we might have only bypassed the first layer. The last group will go back out and gather blank scrolls for copying. We'll work the same way we did with the forbidden scroll, okay? The rest of the clones nodded. Outside of that, we leave everything as it is. This is not like whatever items we found abandoned, this is somebody's family legacy. As much as I like Sasuke, and I don't, even he doesn't something like that. Another series of nods was his answer. The guiding clone smiled. Then let's go, people. It took an hour and a half of searching before the Keton group found what they were looking for. Surprisingly, they ended up finding it in Sasuke's own former home, in his brother's room. Said room had been completely ransacked, but whatever scrolls were there hadn't been destroyed but only neglectfully strewn around. The specific scroll the group now had contained instructions for the clan's great fireball technique, but aimed at those whose elemental affinity wasn't fire. It contained various training exercises to improve ability with fire techniques, along with tips on how to tackle them. None of the Narutos had any ideas what was their elemental affinity, what it entailed, or if they even had one at all, so they guessed that was at least part of the issue they were having. The copy of said scroll joined their expanding library in a position of honor. In the end, it took a little more than 4 hours for the Keton group to go over the totality of the Uchiha compound, and the result was 29 different Justice scrolls, some even containing more than one technique. Their various power levels were all over the place, from a complex A-ranked fire release technique they didn't think they would ever master, to a large scroll of E-ranked cleaning and grooming jutsu. They had even managed to learn and perform a few techniques from that one and used them to clean up their tracks. And by the end of the day the group had managed the first of the fire training exercises, which meant that all of them could generate a flame similar to that of a match from their hands. Prank Day 26. Things were not going well for Janae and Anae. The 2 copies who represented the elder civilian couple were in charge of finding customers for the products the clone network could get their hands on, both for funds as the group did not want to live on Iruka's money, and for their cover. It was not going according to plan, however. The 2 of them had visited dozens of stores, factories and other such enterprises. People seemed interested, some even glad, until the following question came out. Who's the seat representing you on the Merchant Council? That killed everything. Once Janae said that they had no one representing them, their prospective customers at best became shy and evasive, and at worst had them thrown out of the building. Regardless of what happened, they were out of luck. They of course tried getting such a person to represent them, but that was not to be either. The most polite simply said no, while others tried buying them off. No one seemed to want to work with them. The one who came closest asked for an outrageous sum along with half the money from their sales as administrative fees, which were clearly bribes. As such, the merchant couple went and did what any clone of Naruto would when things were not going well. That is, go eat it at Iruka ramen. They were making headway into their second bowl when Tucci came up to join them on his side of the table. "Good day, my name is Tucci and I'm the owner and head chef of Iruka ramen. The young lady who served you is I am, my daughter." He had a serious look. "Is the ramen not to your liking?" Jinne guessed that the man had seen their unhappy faces and had wrongly thought his food was the cause. "Of course not. The food is excellent." He managed not to add as usual at the last second. "Then what is bothering the both of you, if you don't mind me asking?" Tucci continued. Naruto, and by extension, his clones, had an ingrained respect of Ichiroku's owner that bordered on the religious. As such, both Ine and Jinne had no issue answering the man. The story came out piece by piece, just as the clones had prepared it. They were a family of 4 who'd left grass country not to compete with Jinne's elder brother Mataki, who'd inherited their father's business. They'd chosen Konoha because they wanted security, and they thought one could not be more secure than in the middle of a ninja village. And Konoha was the greatest of them. When the problems the two Bunshins had with the various merchants came up, Tucci pronounced himself unsurprised. "You're not the only one who's had issue with that group. Iruka ramen has been in Konoha for more than 30 years, and even before my tenure the owner butted heads with them," he said with a sad smile. "It got worse after the Kyuubi's attack, when half of them died suddenly, but it's pretty much always the same." The chef continued. "They simply try to make more money for themselves by applying economic pressure on other people. Though there are rumors of worse things." "But enough about that," Tucci said, a real smile going back up. "What did you say you dealt in?" "Pretty much everything," Ine said, joining the conversation. "We're a family of traders and we have contacts in a lot of different places." "Why, are you interested?" "You could say I am. There's been a surge in business in the last few weeks and my usual suppliers are struggling to keep up. I might try you out if you can supply me with what I need." Both Jinne and Ine forced themselves not to react. They knew very well what had caused this upswing in sales. As of a little than a month ago, there were more than 1,000 Kage Bunshins of Naruto living in the city. And whatever money the clones got their hands on automatically went on one of two things, pranks or ramen. And ramen meant Ichirako to Naruto. Jinne handed Tucci his copy of the network's catalog. It was the latest version, which included the products from both tea country and vegetable country. Wave, however, was still late. The couple went back to their bowls as Tucci pored over the scroll. I am brought each a third bowl before the chef came back up from reading. "The prices on this scroll aren't the final prices, are they?" he said. "It would be too good to be true otherwise." "No, this is the price we can get these items at." "We atta." He thought for an instant. "A 10% charge for transportation, along with the usual Konoha import tax." This was something the two clone parents had learned while dealing with all the paperwork. Konoha had both an import and an export tax, which went directly to the Hokage, and was used to fund village security. Tucci thought visibly for an instant, evidently calculating the numbers in his head. He then smiled. "I think we can do business. Who knows, if the quality is good and the delivery rapid, I might have some other contacts who could use your services. Now, let's discuss particulars." Tucci and Jinne shook hands on a deal an hour later, and both made their way back to their respective shops. It was only a start, but the network had its official first client. Prank Day 29. "Come on, try it." said Ken on his left. Try it, added Jishir on his right. I don't know. It feels like a waste, replied Garo. He was a Naruto clone working in Tanzakugai in an hotel as general help. Not to be insulting. Thing was, Tanzakugai very much had a gambling culture. The tourists came here to play, the ones living there played, everyone played, except maybe the casino owners. And even that wasn't always true. You just got a bonus yesterday, so you won't even affect your finances, Ken said, crossing his arms. Live a little, he exclaimed. Jishir came up and decided to try another way. You ever tried it? Garo was taken aback by the change in tactics. No. Then how can you say it's a waste? He continued. You think we're lying? No. Then come. If you don't like it, you can at least say that you've tried. We won't badger you anymore, replied Jishir. Promised? Samurai's honor, Jishir answered, putting his hand on his heart. Ken emulated him a second later. Okay. Just once, Goro finally acquiesced. It couldn't hurt, could it? That night, the three of them ended up in one of the many casinos of the city. They played for tiny sums, nearly nothing, just for the fun of it. After 30 minutes, Goro had doubled his bonus. After an hour, Ken and Jishir caught on their comrades' luck, and moved to the roulette table. The Naruto clone had doubled his monthly salary by then. It took 3 hours before casino employees asked them to come back another day. Security had watched over them like hawks, but couldn't see any proof of cheating. Garo left the building telling the others that he did have fun, and with enough money to single-handedly pay for Ariko's house. His two partners left each with the equivalent of a few months' work. He did make a couple of bunshin as soon as he was alone, and these hit 3 different casinos with similar results. The word was out in the entirety of Naruto's clones before the sun was back up. All Narutos had luck at games of chance to spare. Prank Day 33. The real Naruto did not always go to classes himself. Sometimes he was Ariko, sometimes he was Muramaru, sometimes he skipped school entirely to train, and all of this never on a fixed schedule. For the first Taijutsu exam, he went as Muramaru. This was planned. Kiritori, the Taijutsu teacher, had started being quite a bit more demanding of the male clone than he was of everyone else. Not a punishment, but looking more like a test of his endurance than anything else. As such, Naruto expected that the first exam would be rougher for him as his orphan copy than it would be for everyone else. He was there mainly as a preventive measure to ensure the continuation of his prank. And Kiritori did not disappoint. Where everyone faced someone roughly their level, the teacher took on Muramaru personally. And while Naruto was pretty sure the man was pulling his punches, it sure didn't feel like it. Nevertheless, Naruto gave the fight his all, and managed to last longer than the rest of the class had in their own battles. By the end, Naruto was tired, sweating and sore even in places he hadn't known could be that way. Kiritori stopped the fight barely a second before Muramaru dropped to the ground, exhausted. The teacher then left his student recover while he went over the results with everyone else. Said student ended up going last, classes having ended a while ago. First, your notes, the Chunin teacher said in his usual monotone. You have a clear A for the exam. The only things keeping you from a perfect grade are the facts that you still are wasting movements, and that you are still telegraphing your attacks a touch too much. Fix those 2 flaws and you will be as good as someone your age can be. The teacher then took a deep breath. Which brings me to the second item. He suddenly sounded twice as serious. I have a proposition for you. Something outside of school. I'd like you to meet me at the Memorial Stone tonight at 8. He put his hand on Muramaru's shoulder. Now, go home and have a good supper. The teacher rose and left. Oh, and good work on the exam, he added as he was crossing the door. Naruto didn't know what to think about that, but knew one thing for sure, 2 heads worked better than one. As such, he quickly made his way home. The council needed to be informed of this, if only to discuss it. Maybe they'd even be able to have an idea about what was the proposition. He'd eat during the meeting. The council had no more clue what was the teacher's proposition than Naruto himself had. The only thing they were sure was that it wasn't the prank being found out, as everyone agreed that Kiritori would have gone straight to the other teachers, or worse, the Hokage, with his news. It comforted him somewhat, but not enough. Naruto did not like having too much attention paid to his clones outside of school. The girl gang was okay, not even being ninjas yet, but the focus of a chunin, high-skilled at that, was something he wanted to avoid. Nevertheless, he made his way to the memorial stone at the appointed time. Not being there would scarcely make things better. Still disguised as Muramaru, the real Naruto found Kiritori waiting for him where he had set up this meeting. "Follow me," the man said, and his voice was unnaturally tight. The chunin led the boy to a specific stone on the side of the area. It was somewhat taller than the others, with a single name at the top in bigger letters than the other names. Minato Namikaze, 4th Hokage of Konoha. You might not have known, but less than a year before you were born a demon attacked this village, the Kyubi. It was taller than anything living has the right to be, and its malevolence was so great some people died simply by looking at it. The 4th Hokage, whose name is at the top of this monument, ended up fighting the beast. Using a forbidden technique, he defeated the monster at the cost of his own life. Kiritori took a deep breath. But not before the demon caused incalculable damage to the village. Every single person on this stone died that day. He sighed. I have 17 family members on that stone. Both my parents, a single grandparent, my wife, my 2 sons. He trudged on. Both of my brothers and my sister, all of their spouses of their children. Naruto couldn't say anything about that. He'd know mentally that the Kyubi had killed hundreds, maybe thousands of people, but it was the first time that he really saw the impact it had. He could almost see Kiritori's family in his mind's eye, and couldn't help but shed a tear at their loss. I would have happily joined them, but I made an oath to my father. The same oath my brothers swore, the same my father had years earlier. To keep the family art alive, and not have it fall in the hands of other clans, he continued. My sons had made the oath, but their time has unfortunately passed, he said, looking down. I am getting old, and with the job I'm in I probably won't last another 10 years. As such I've been searching for the person who could be the next master of the sharp fist. And you're the best I've seen in the past 5 years, and the only one I can entrust this to. I've been testing you these past weeks, pushing you to your limits, to see if you could handle it. You did even better than I hoped, better than I did at that age. You have what it takes to be a master of the Hyuujin family style. The teacher looked directly at Naruto. As such, this is my proposition. Should you accept it, I will take you as my student and heir of my family. I will teach you everything there is to being a ninja, and how to survive it both physically and mentally. It will harsh, and you may have a very different opinion of me once it is done, but I will make you as great as I can. Are you in agreement? Kiritori said after a pause. Naruto did not know what to answer. There was too much thought slamming together in his head. There was the prank and the disguises and all the clones and someone who wanted him and... In the end, as usual, Naruto Uzumaki went with his heart. I accept, he said solemnly. Chapter 12, Training in Tribulations. Prank Day 34. Even though the day was a day off from the academy, Naruto called a meeting of those who were in on the prank. The decision the original had made was to be discussed, its effects needed to be analyzed. Good day everyone, Naruto said as soon as the 3 stragglers, the clones in charge of the clone network, arrived. He could have started without them, but the real student wanted everyone informed. I'm sorry for the unplanned meeting, but some things have to be discussed as soon as they can. Some of you might already have heard, but I'll repeat it anyway. He continued. Yesterday, Kiritori offered Muramaru to take him as an apprentice, and so to teach him his family art. I was Muramaru at the time, and I accepted his offer. What? Iruka said, rising from his seat. He then seemed to realize his reaction, and looked around for a moment. His eyes then came to rest on the original Naruto. "Naruto, can I speak to you alone for a moment?" The Chunin said, his voice visibly tense. "I don't think you need to." He started answering. "Now," he said, his voice slipping in the usual tones he used as a teacher when punishing Naruto for his pranks. The effect was immediate. All the clones quickly and silently left. Only Ichibo stayed, not moving from the top of Naruto's head. "What were you thinking?" Iruka started as soon as the three were alone. "The teacher most likely to find you out, and you decide to have him adopt you under a false identity?" He seemed to realize something. "You didn't tell him about the prank, did you?" "Of course not," Naruto replied. "And he didn't adopt me, actually." "He might as well have. An apprentice is considered an heir unless the master has either a wife or children," Iruka replied, clearly quoting the law. "Again, what were you thinking?" "I just couldn't say no," Naruto said, his head down. "You didn't see him before that stone," explaining his story. "It hurt to watch how much he loved his family." Naruto brought his head back up. "He's dead inside, you know. I didn't realize it before yesterday, but he's nearly empty. The only thing that's left is the continuation of his art, and I couldn't take that away from him. I know it's a risk, and that it wasn't a bright move, but it was the only one I could make." "Will you be living with him?" Iruka finally asked, his tone much more even. "No." "Good of you to at least think of that." "It was his idea," Naruto replied. "To keep off any image of favoritism," he said. The room was silent for a minute. "Will you be telling him about the prank?" Iruka finally asked. "Not for now at least," the boy answered. "I'd prefer not before the end of the academy year, if possible." "Okay," the teacher answered. He then withdrew something from his pockets. "Take this with you then." Naruto recognized it instantly once he had it in his hands. It was the scroll Iruka had received during his meeting with the Sandaime. "If anything happens and your identity is discovered, I want you to show Kiritori this and explain him the situation. Send him to me if he still doesn't believe. If worse comes to worse, I'll bring him before the Hokage with everything I found." "Come on," Naruto replied. "Don't do that." "I'd prefer not to, but it's a valid last resort." "Better that than being sentenced with treason or something similar," Iruka countered. "Treason?" Ichibo cried out from his perch. Iruka laughed a sarcastic little laugh. "I wouldn't be surprised. I've begun not trusting logic when someone else's reaction of you is involved. You don't think there would be people who'd execute you just to get back at the Kyuubi?" The student had to agree his teacher was right. There would be many clamoring for the death of the beast without care for its container. "You may very well be right, sensei," he said dejectedly. "Anyway," Iruka said, "it's only a last resort." He then smiled. "I'll be counting on your usual good work on the impersonation, Naruto." He then ruffled his student's hair from the side, taking care of not disturbing Ichibo there. "Can the others get back inside now?" Naruto asked. "Oh, of course," the Chunin replied. He'd completely forgotten that they were supposed to be in a meeting. "Sorry for the interruption." The rest of the discussion went as well as it could, considering most of the members were Naruto clones. It lasted only a dozen more minutes before everyone went his own way. Prank Day 35. Jinei and Ine were waiting for Ichiraka's opening, faces down in shame. They felt like they had betrayed one of the few real friends they, as Naruto clones, had. It had taken 9 days to fill Tuchi's order. While the 2 first thirds were en route by day after the ramen chef's request, the rest took quite a bit longer to acquire. People were out of stock, others put severe markups on their prices, or simply wouldn't sell at all. The group had to improvise. It took a few days to find other suppliers, and in some case they even had to go to the source and buy directly from farmers and fishermen. Then it was found that some of their suppliers had used the opportunity to unload rotten or otherwise outdated merchandise, and they had to do that part all over again. They'd expected to take 3, maybe 4 days at most. It took more than twice as much. Still, they'd learned quite a bit. The merchant network would be much more vigilant in the future, and they'd found that storage scrolls kept perishable things from rotting. They had new and better sources for the items Tucci had ordered, which would make it easier for future orders. The two clone hoped dearly there would be future orders. Outside Ichiraku, they had nothing. The chef finally came out of the kitchen and greeted the two merchants. "Good day. I suppose you are here for more ramen? Chicken like last time, or something else?" "No, we're here for a delivery," Ine said. "Already?" Tucci said, surprised. "You must have good contacts. Can I inspect the merchandise?" "Sure. We have a space rented in a warehouse near the East Gate," Jine said. "I can show you right now if you wish." Tucci nodded. Please take the counter. I'll be out for half an hour." "Sure, Dad," came her voice from the back of the shop. The three did small talk as the clone led the elder Ichiraku to the warehouse. Once inside, the chef waited no time before inspecting the merchandise. Good. He finally said. "Everything is fresh enough. Some of the fish will have to be cooked soon, but everything seems in order." He turned toward the two Naruto bunshins. "Can you have this brought to the shop this afternoon? I'll have a bank draft ready for you then." "Sure," Ine replied. "Pleasure doing business with you," Tucci said, then shook hands with both clones before leaving. Later that day, the two bunshins came out of Ichiraku with both the money from their first sale and a second, smaller order from the ramen stand. They'd also given the chef their address, and he said he'd contact them if he knew anyone looking for products they could get. With all the losses and errors the network had made, they wouldn't be doing much profit over their first order, but their name was now out there. The clone network was now officially in business. Prank Day 40. The Fire Ninjutsu team now understood why the Scroll of Forbidden Seals said the technique they were training intended to kill its practitioners. They'd finally had the breakthrough they'd been waiting for, and could now fully perform the technique, albeit not in the traditional manner. 5 clones had already died from failing to maintain the jutsu. And by damages which would have killed or maimed a normal ninja. The thing was that once you had the trick, putting fire aspect chakra in the sphere was easy and frightfully so at that. There was however no way of knowing how much heat was inside outside of the fact that it became more and more difficult to handle when greater amounts of energy were inside. And when said sphere collapsed, it would release all that energy in a single burst, however much that was. The only defense the group had found up until now was to use another instance of the techniques to absorb the fire from the first. And even that had its drawbacks, as it could only be used upon a sphere bursting, since two stable spheres coming into contact with one another would destabilize both. Nevertheless, the group persevered. They currently were training to maintain powerful spheres without issue, and there were 6 clones maintaining the black balls in an isolated corner of the underground base. The record for now was a 7-days-old sphere, having been traded back and forth between clones day and night. The bunshin leading the group had no clue how strong it was by that point, but didn't want to find out. He probably would turn to smoke if he did. Prank Day 44. Kiritori's family owned a simple dojo built on a large piece of land on Konoha's eastern side. It was visibly built over the foundations of a much bigger building, as traces of the old were still easily discerned. "Now that the paperwork is all done and signed, we can finally start," the older man said with a slight smile. He had been noticeably happier in the last few days, and many had discussed the changes. Naruto was simply happy to have made someone's life better. The term sharp fist is actually a misnomer, the teacher continued. It is mainly based on how the style looks more than how it works. I will show you. The Chunin took a specific stance, one different from any he had seen before. Kiritori was half-turned before him, with both arms at 90-degree angles on either side of his body. "Now, attack me," Kiritori said. Naruto as Niramara did so, going for one of basic combinations of the academy style. The opening kick the Chunin parried with his left arm, and Naruto tried twisting for the follow-up attack, but found he couldn't. His leg was glued to the teacher's forearm. It was Kiritori who turned, and the added momentum for the pulling forced the student to follow. The hold only released once Naruto had passed his teacher's position, and he was sent tumbling and rolling on the ground. "What was that?" The person disguised as Niramara replied as he got back up. "That way you grabbed me." "It is both a common chakra control exercise and the core of the sharp fist," the Chunin explained. While the sharp fist does have cutting techniques, at its base it is a soft style that manages its opponents. As such, it has more in common with the gentle fist of the Hyuga than with any other style in Konoha. "That poking style of theirs?" Naruto said. "Indeed." "How?" "Both try to control their enemies. The Hyuga do it by limiting the offensive abilities of their opponents, while my family's style does it by controlling the attacks themselves," Kiritori explained. "How does the sharp fist attack then?" "The same techniques can be used offensively. The style focuses on attacks upon weak points, and what it uses to defend it can also use to open defenses, granting access to those areas." He went to one of the training dummies standing near the walls of the dojo, which was standing straight in a defensive position. Hitting first with an elbow, the teacher then forced the dummy's guard open by making its arm stick at the point of contact and twisting it out of the way. He even struck the dummy straight in the throat in the same movement. "Like so." "Effective," Niramara said, visibly impressed. "Yes," the teacher said, continuing. "But each part in turn. The first technique to master is the chakra control exercise, which is commonly called the tree walking technique. One simply channels energy to the area he wants to stick with, focusing in such a way as to stick like glue. It is used as a control exercise because one must regulate their chakra correctly. Too little and one doesn't stick." He demonstrated on a piece of wood at the dojo's side. The Chunin managed to lift the piece of timber only a single centimeter before the wood fell back to the ground. Too much and one damages the surface. This time, the wood rapped as he placed his hand, sending a few splinters in the air. Kiritori then turned toward his student. "Start with the hands, as channeling chakra is easier there." He moved to the side, leaving Niramara to take his place before the planks. "Don't worry, I will be watching and correcting you if necessary. Now, go." Prank Day 49. The trio of Naruto clones sighed as the shore became visible through the fog. One last Kawamiri and they were finally back on dry land after nearly a full day in the water. The Naruto group was finally in wave. They were all that was left of a team of 20 who had tried swimming from the Coast of Fire, and the 7th such team to try their luck at it. The first 4 teams had tried boats, but the traitorous currents, the hidden reefs and other such dangers combined with the ever-present fog meant they'd failed halfway at best. The ones swimming did better, but still faced constant losses and clones. Only the last and largest group had managed anyone getting there. The next day, after a night's rest, the 3 made their way along the coast and found themselves outside and in sight what they supposed was the closest settlement to Fire Country. "We split up," the leader said. He wasn't one of the original network bunshin sent to Wave, who were all gone by the 5th attempt, but he was the oldest amongst those left. "We transform into unremarkable citizens and check things out. If you see anything interesting for the merchant network, note it, but I'm more interested in what's making it so difficult to get here." He turned toward his 2 compatriots. "I'll be Shiro and I'll hitting the merchants and the shops. You." He pointed to the clone on his left. "We'll be Nico and you'll look at the coast. Maybe we'll have more luck with finding passage on this side." He then turned to the last copy. "You'll be Sanryu and I want you to hit the bars. Try to get as much information as possible on what's happening around here. The newly named Shiro looked away at the town in the distance. With all the issues we had, there's definitely something going on here, and we need to know what. He turned back to the other two. You okay with that? They nodded, faces serious. Good, the leader said. We meet back here at sundown. He clapped his hands. Let's go, people. Each went his own way. By the third step all were unremarkable civilians, each different from the previous. They were inside the city less than a minute after that. Following the water, Nico found boats. Broken boats. He might not be a specialist in maritime construction, but even he could identify damage done by a sharp object upon wood. The boats he saw had been destroyed purposely, and he would bet that some group had taken axes to them. With the numbers he found, he was pretty confident this was the work of more than a single person, as it would have taken days for a determined man to wreck that many. He also saw people fishing, but the catches were few and the sizes small. Asking did not help, as the people were surprisingly defensive of what little fish they had. He was looked at carefully, as if everyone expected him to steal the little they had. It did not fill the Naruto Bunshin with confidence. By the time the sun came down, Nico had found only 2 boats that might be seaworthy, and he wasn't even sure about that. That was out of more than 200 wrecks, which meant that unless they swam back, the 3 of them were stuck in wave for the time being. There was nothing on sale. No, that wasn't quite true. There was a little on sale, but nothing at any kind of reasonable price, and no food at all. The people were guarded and unhelpful, and there were beggars at every corner, emaciated and visibly suffering. There was nothing here that could be of interest to the merchant network. Not in the state the town was in. Shiro tried asking around to find out what was the issue, but no one was talking. Everyone ran or hid when he came close, and even the beggars were silent when asked what was going on. The clone was pretty sure there was some group or organization enforcing this no-talking policy. The fear in the eyes of those he asked was particularly illuminating in that regard. After an hour going around and having no success at gathering any more information, Shiro made his way back to the meeting spot. He hoped the other two had better luck. It was only midday, and the bars were already full. Sanryu, noticing the noise, had wisely decided to wait and watch before entering the first bar he found. A few minutes of observation revealed a half-dozen mercenaries coming and going, and his civilian appearance would have struck out like a sore thumb there. So, he changed it. His new look he took from a memory of a female clone serving in a bar. Tall, broad shoulders, and few facial scars. That and a scratched-out mist insignia on his forehead. The female clone had clearly seen how missing Nin were treated, and that was exactly what Sanryu needed right now. Nobody stopped him as he made his way inside, and a single glare cleared him a spot at the counter. Beer, he called, and a fearful bartender handed him one instantly. He took in half the glass in a single gulp, thanking in his mind the fact that clones didn't seem to be able to get drunk. He then slammed back the glass. Tastes like piss, he said, keeping in character. The mercenaries around relaxed at that. I know, right? One said, they laughed. A good half the men in the tavern followed suit. While they did so, the Naruto copy took the time to look around. The whole place was filled with fighters and warriors, visibly swords for hire, with weapons in plain sight. Taking his glass, he tossed back the rest of the beer and swore. I gotta get myself some better booze than this, he said, then looked at the tables opposite the counter. Any of you scum know anybody paying? There's bound to be someone in need of dying around here. A few drinkers were offended and reached for their weapons, but it didn't go farther than that. Then a mousy dark-haired man came up. Well, Shiro and Nico were deep in discussing when Sanryu came up. He was back in his civilian guise. Are your news as bad as mine? He asked as he stopped before the two. Depends on what you have. Shiro replied. What we can say is that there are no boats, nothing to buy, and that everyone seems to be starving, all of that because of some unknown group. Gato Company, Sanria said. What? That's who's in control of this place. From what I remember, they're a shipping outfit doing import-export, he explained. Gato has at least a bar full of mercenaries under his command, and at least another missing ninja. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was at more than twice that much. If they're starving the place and cutting communications, that means they're hiding something, probably drugs or smuggling, Shiro replied. Maybe even slave trading, added Nico. True, the leader said. Any opposition? Not much, the bar infiltrator replied. Main rebels were eliminated pretty thoroughly some time ago. Only one left seemed to be an old man who's building a bridge to the mainland. It's about halfway done, but the man is now missing. The other two whistled. He's got courage, I'll give him that, Shiro said. Question is, what do we do about it? This place is worthless to the network, but I don't like leaving it like this. And bringing more money here to improve things will only make it worse. The three were silent for a good minute, then Nico answered. We kick thing up the chain. As much as I want to get involved, the Clone Council needs to know about this before we try to do anything. The other two nodded. And I have an idea how, the clone continued. Prank Day 50. Sarabody Hiruzen sighed, looking down at the boy who was seated in the chair opposite his desk. If only he could focus all this talent toward better applications, the third Hokage thought, he'd be one of our best genin. I suppose you know why you are here, Naruto? I didn't do it. The boy in orange replied instantly. The Hokage noticed he was at least getting better at lying, since he had none of his usual tells present. Oh, and I suppose you don't know who painted Kazuhi's classroom bright pink, right? The academy student rose as if to exclaim something, then fell back down in his seat. No. He said, and Sarutobi could clearly see the lie this time. This has got to stop, Naruto, the Hokage explained. This is your 4th year at the academy. 4th. It's clear you don't lack the talent, with everything you managed to accomplish, but you have to do better. Better. It won't be possible for you to stay in the academy forever until you pass. Already, I've been having some issues keeping you enrolled. The fact that he'd started young was the only saving grace he had. There were still students Naruto's age enrolled, so he'd been able to argue for another year. Tell me, what are you doing differently this year? The Hokage asked. How do you expect to pass this time? Let it not be said that the Hokage wasn't curious about this prank of his. He was glad Naruto had at least an idea, but curiosity was gnawing at him. This time, Naruto didn't even rise. He simply stood there in his chair, arms crossed and refusing to say anything. This is the 4th prank on the teachers in 2 weeks, Naruto, and not small-scale ones either, Sarutobi said. And I suppose you'll say that you had nothing to do with the teachers' offices getting filled with cats? Naruto smirked at those words, and Hiruzen had him then. I see you did, he said, voice serious. Yeah, I did that one, Naruto said, sighing. But you had to admit it was funny, old man. The Hokage took a deep breath. Let's make a deal, Naruto. I won't punish you for those pranks of yours, not right now, he explained. He hadn't planned to, since he didn't want to interfere any more into the boy's school life. But you have to pass this year. I'm not even sure I'll be able to get you a place in the academy in the next session. You do that, and there won't be any punishment for those pranks of yours. He then glared down at the boy. Fail, however, and I'll see you on trash duty until you turn 18. You have that, Naruto? No sweat. The boy replied. It's a deal, then? The Hokage said, extending his hand. The boy shook. It's a deal. Sarutobi smiled as he sat back down. I'll hold you on to that, he said seriously, then smiled. So, tell me about those pranks you most assuredly did not do. Naruto smiled back. Well, first there was Prank Day 51. Iruka had been surprised earlier at being called for a meeting, especially since the next one planned would only in 2 days. He'd stressed for a moment, imaging the worst, before relaxing. Naruto would have informed him directly if something really dangerous was going on. Still, it occupied his thoughts until classes finally ended. This time, he used the Urahara passageway closest to his home to reach Naruto's base. By now, he was quite used to the darkened paths, and found himself at the council table less than 2 minutes before the appointed time. He was also starting to recognize the different council members. The trio with the books at the end of the table was the group in charge of the trading network, followed by the 2 merchant parents. The Naruto next to them wasn't the real one, only a clone who was currently taking his place in class. Iruka was next, talking with the clone in charge of the underground training. There was also a new one he hadn't seen. Only differences between him and the original were a set of goggles tied to his left arm instead of over his head, and a patch on the other side with what seemed to be a pair of waves depicted. The Chunin didn't know what that meant, but he suspected he would soon find out. "Sorry, I got intercepted below," the original disguised as Muramura said, finally taking his place at the table. Since Ichibo's arrival, he was easier to find. Outside public situations, the rabbit could always be found on or around the real academy student. In the last few days, Naruto was always Muramura, as the training his new master was giving him was too intense for a Kage Bunshin. So, the real student started. "Sorry, all for the surprise meeting, but the network heads have something to discuss which they claim is urgent." He turned to the 3. "Your show now." Let me guess," Jinei, the civilian father, interrupted. "Wave?" "Yes, Wave," the center merchant had answered. Iruka remembered something about Wave being late in some way. "And what's so urgent about it?" he asked. The unknown clone stepped up. "I'm Nico, 4th generation jumper as part of the original Wave expedition." "4th generation?" Ichibo interjected. "Clone of a clone of a clone of a clone," responded 4 different Narutos around the table, Nico included. "2 days ago, me and 2 other clones finally managed to swim our way to Wave," he continued. The Chunin teacher's eyes grew wide. The waters around Wave were well known to be treacherous and usable only by knowledgeable sailors. He'd known Jinin who died in places like that one. He didn't want to know how many clones had vanished on the way. "There's nothing valuable in Wave for the trading network at the moment, and a simple reason to that," Gato Corporation, the jumper explained. "They amassed a large force of mercenaries along with some missing ninjas, and used that force to close down all access to and from the island." "Ouch," Iruka said, then continued when he saw everyone was looking at him. "Gato Corporation is big. Very big. Big enough that it is economically more powerful than a good number of ninja villages and countries." Nico continued. "One thing is sure, whatever they're planning in Wave, it can't be good. The population is starving, fearful, and untrusting. There's no law, and the mercenaries are basically doing what they want with the population." "I suppose you have a plan?" the real Naruto asked. Nico nodded. "The 3 of us do. You see, there's someone building." Iruka rose, interrupting the shadow clone. "I'm sorry?" he said, eyes wide. "You're planning to take on Gato Corporation? Did you miss the part where I said it was as powerful as some ninja villages?" The entire membership of the council looked back and forth at each other, then nodded. "I've been oppressed enough that I won't let others be so, not if I can do anything about it," the original Naruto said, and you could hear the finality in his words. The Chunin teacher fell back into his seat. "It's much too dangerous. You'll be killed." "He won't be there," Nico countered. "The boss has to stay here to keep the masquerade up. We clones are the ones who'll be taking on this mission." There were nods all around the table. "And it's not like we won't be making any profit out of this." Iruka signaled him to continue. "Right now, everything the trading network has done has been based out of Konoha right here," he explained. "However, the farther we get from Fire Country, the less useful this becomes. The network has been for new place to base itself out of, but hasn't met much luck until now. Nico stopped to take a breath. For operations in the east, Wave is perfect. It's right between fire and water, and is very close to the main shipping lines in the area. Once Gato is out of Wave, there would be no competition against us, and some of the natural products of the island are sure to sell well. Iruka nodded in confirmation. Wave Island tobacco is well known to be the best in the elemental countries, and there are numerous plants used in the fabrication of medicine that are originating from there. The teacher then sighed. I'm not happy about this, but I'll listen. What is your plan then? Well, Nico said. Here's what we came up with. First, we'll need to have. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfictions. Looking forward to having you on board again.